All right, today's notes are on how the Islamic faith is going to spread across the Middle East, Northern Africa, parts more of South Asia, and eventually into Spain. So in 632, Muhammad passes away, and the religion needs a new leader. So the Islamic leader, similar to what the Christians at this period have as the Pope, what the Catholics of today have as the Pope, are called the caliphs or the caliphs. And that word means successor, like successor to Muhammad, or deputy, like deputy to Muhammad, deputy of the faith. There's a lot of debate over who becomes these first several successors, and actually ultimately who becomes successors even in today's time. But suffice it to say that the first one becomes Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr is a friend of Muhammad, a personal friend who obviously has spent a lot of time with Muhammad, who has gone around traveling as Muhammad is teaching others about Islam. And Abu Bakr is credited with being the first one to use the military might of the people of the Islamic faith in order to maintain control of the entire Arabian Peninsula. So thinking about like the map of the Middle East, you have the boot of the Arabian Peninsula, and you have Mecca and Medina sort of here in this area. He's going to unite all of the peoples of the Arabian Peninsula. And a lot of people then are going to convert to Islam, and as we've seen in some of our other information, not really necessarily by force, not because the military was saying like convert or die, which is something that happens throughout history in a lot of faiths, but actually because of the policies and the protections of the Islamic religion once you were under an Islamic control. The first four are all known as rightly guided caliphs. The first four caliphs all personally knew Muhammad. They are people who interacted with him. You can think of them the same way that you can consider like the disciples of Jesus. They are people who traveled with him, people who listened to him speak. They have direct, first-hand, primary knowledge of the things that Muhammad believed in. There's another topic that we need to cover called jihad. Jihad is holy war. So it's any time that Islamics are soldiers are having wars against non-believers of Islam. Now, according to the Quran, you can only do so if you have been attacked. The only time to rightfully fight another person is if they have attacked you. You can't just go out and be like, well, we want to take over this area, so we're going to take it over. You have to have a jihad, to have a religious justification. You have to have been personally attacked for your religion. And this is ultimately what becomes used to spread all the way across vast portions of the Eastern Hemisphere. By 750, now remember, Muhammad is born in the late 500s, and within 200 years, the Muslim Empire is going to touch from the Atlantic Ocean in Spain and in Africa all the way to the Indus River. This is going to extend all the way to Pakistan. So it's a vast swath of land that is now under Muslim control. And so actually I'm going to click on this, and it's going to actually turn into a map where we can see how those things have expanded. All right, so here's that map. And as we click on it, so you can see that in 634, which is after the death of Muhammad and also the death of the first caliph, Abu Bakr, only this sort of salmony color around the Arabian Peninsula has been conquered. And within another, say, 30 years, they have all of the Middle East, all of modern-day Middle East, including chunks of the Byzantine Empire, as well as parts of Egypt and northern Africa, headed almost to Carthage. And then by 750, you can see how much more land has been gained. I mean, this is a very quick transition of power. This period, actually, if you count from 634 to 750, that's 120 years. And that's how many people have now become influenced by the Muslim faith. If I click it one more time, this red line, which extends parts of Spain, you can see that the Catholics of Spain have started to take back some of their land, into the Byzantine Empire, as well as all of the Sahara here, have all been picked up and controlled by Muslim influence. And the reason that this is so important and the reason this is so successful is largely that Muslim armies are very dedicated both to their faith as well as to their military superiors. They have a lot of belief in what they are doing, and that by spreading jihad, they're also spreading the word of God. They also have very well-trained, expert commanders whose military strategies are above and beyond superior to most of those in the lands that they're taking over. The other key is that the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire, which is still around in essentially modern-day Iran, the Persians did survive the Roman Empire. The Byzantines and the Persians have been battling each other for, I want to say, about 100 years. And because of that, their militaries are exhausted, their resources are exhausted, so the Muslims are able to take advantage of that, and so they're able to take over the Persian Empire very, very quickly. Islam also gains strength because it talks about equality and hope to people who've been persecuted in the past. When you were living under various different cultures, Christians and Zoroastrians, remember the monotheistic faith of the Persians, as well as the Jewish people living in the Middle East, have all been persecuted for significant periods of time. And so when you're living under the Islamic Empire, if you convert to Islam, and actually if you stay as a Christian, which is key, where you look at this piece, as you stay as a Christian, you actually have a lot of hope because you're not being persecuted. So Zoroastrians, Jews, and Christians are all protected peoples according to the Islamic faith because they are people of the book. They are all still going to believe in the same God. They believe in the same principles of the things that you see in the Ten Commandments. They are all pervasive through Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Same basic tenets. There's just a couple of key pieces as to why you would maybe politically or economically convert. For instance, if you stayed Christian or Jewish or Zoroastrian under the Islamic Empire, you actually paid more in taxes, and so it was a financial decision to convert for some people. Converting to Islam meant that you were still praying to the same God, however, you weren't paying as much money in taxes, so it was an easier transition for some people to make. So the first group we're going to talk about are the Umayyads. The Umayyads are a dynasty of power in the 7th century, so the 600s. So Muhammad would have lived under with an understanding of the Umayyad dynasty. They then are going to move the capital from Mecca into Syria. Mecca is kind of far away from the everyday world. And if you think back on that map we were just looking at, Mecca is not very centralized, and Syria is in the Middle East. It's a lot more easy to access, both for trade and for moving your military around. The problem is that Muslims in Saudi Arabia were super angry about it because this has been the heart of the empire. This is where Muhammad is from, and Muhammad preaches. Muhammad is an Arabian. And when the Umayyads moved the capital, that sort of upset some people because it was basically turning their back on the heart of Islam. The other issue that people take up with the Umayyads is they're very opulent. Opulent means that you're not just wealthy, you are spending that wealth on palaces and making things beautiful and hosting parties. They're very showy with their wealth. And because of that, that is very offensive to that entire Muslim concept. I mean, the Quran is very specific that you should be humble and you should give to charity. And instead of the Umayyads doing that, they are using this money for the glorification of themselves, not the glorification of God. And that is very offensive to the Muslims. So there's going to be a split that emerges in the Islamic faith after the assassination of Ali, who was one of the rightly guided caliphs, and the Umayyads believed that anybody can be caliph. So as long as you are just, as long as you are devout, as long as you are dedicated to your studies of the faith and you can be a good person, then you can be a caliph. And that's what the majority of Muslims in the world today believe, is that anybody who is called could be ultimately a caliph. There is a group of people, a minority group, which are the Shia, and the Shia are globally a minority, but they are the majority of Muslims in places like Iran. But Shia Muslims believe that a person could only be caliph if they are directly descendant from Muhammad. So there's some bloodline that's tracked there, that Muhammad was chosen by God specifically for some family qualities that he had, and that's only passed down genetically, essentially. It's sort of like a monarchy system, a hereditary system for the caliphs, and those are the Shia. And so there's several differences between Sunni and Shia Muslims, but that's sort of the main deal, is who can be in control of the faith. There was a third group of Muslims called the Sufi, and the Sufi are actually more similar to monks in the Catholic faith, whereas they are going to be more about creating schools and study. They're the ones responsible for writing down Sharia law. Sharia law is codes of conduct for Muslims, but Sharia law is different from the Ten Commandments because Sharia law is publicly enforced by Muslim governments, and so it's a lot more harsh of a structure, a lot more stringent of a structure. But the Sufi are the one who sort of read through all of the hadiths and all of the Qurans and all of the writings and put together what that code is going to be. So in 750, the Abbasids are going to take over the Umayyads. They're going to have a coup, and they're going to take over the government. And the Umayyads flee to Spain, and that's the family that's going to control the Andalusian period of Spain, which is Northern African Moors are going to move into Spain and bring in the Muslim faith. The Umayyads are going to be the ones responsible for maintaining that power from 750 until the late 1400s. About the same time that Columbus is sailing to the New World is when the Moors are expelled from Spain. The Abbasids are going to move the capital to Baghdad, which is still not Saudi Arabia, right? It's actually Iraq, but its access to trade and goods is superior to what they had in Syria. So the Muslim trade is going to expand across Africa, Europe, and Asia. With that is going to be a lot about art and learning and that sort of thing. The Arabic language is moved. Arabic numerals are also like 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are Arabic numerals. Those are going to spread. They're also going to have a unified currency and the ability to write checks. All of the banking processes that go with trade are going to expand because of this influence. Cultural diffusion spreads from the trade routes that emerged in Mecca and Medina. And in spite of the distance and the desert environments, it's a massive, massive move into the Fertile Crescent, Iran, Central Asia, all the way to across like Algeria, into Spain. This is a massive, massive movement. Political unity does fall apart when Ali dies, so that's why we have people like the Umayyads and the Abbasids taking control. So politically, the governments don't remain in power similarly. However, the Arabic language does unify them. The Islamic faith does unify them. The key here is there is slavery, and with every other organization, every other culture we've talked about, that slavery is based never on race, but on generally things like being taken over or being sold because of debts. All right, and that's it. Make sure you follow it all along with those 2 pages, and let me know if you have any questions.